Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am sitting at the table with someone that I have been wanting to have here since I started the show, which is my dear friend, Tim Sperber. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay.
Glad to be here.
Yes. So you are from the Lewiston School District and actually, so you're a principal right now and I can't wait to dive into all of the things. I feel like I'm someone that loves to give some context. I love context and I love a good story. Those
Sure.
are kind of like two things. So right now, like there's just a million things going through my head because I'm like, I don't have all day and I want to make sure I get to the things that like are just gonna, like really capture. And I was telling Clinton, my husband, before I got here, I was like, oh my gosh, I could like literally talk to this guy all day long. He's like, I know, Alexis. I know.
I love it.
So just in terms of context, you're currently a principal at a middle school
Correct.
in the Lewiston School District. And you have you started as an English teacher?
So yeah, gosh, in the early 90s, I started at Lapwai Middle School in Lapwai, Idaho. I was in seventh grade language arts and civics. I taught drama. I was the football coach and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's how I started. It seems like a lifetime ago.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I mean, you move through all the decades and you're just like, whoa, was that really?
Here we are.
Here you are.
Yep.
I mean, you have like kids, you have a grandkid, you hang out with your kids and their spouse, their significant other.
Yep.
I mean, that's the time of life you're in.
It's fun. And it happened so fast. And now with grandbaby and my wife retired and now we're taking off on a new adventure. So here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
It's great.
So I've known you for 10 years and I got to know you because you were the principal of my children's elementary school when we moved to Lewiston. And I was kind of thinking, sometimes people ask me like about the podcast and like the why behind it and all those things. And I realized for me that it was when I was thinking about this lens of a school community and wanting to kind of focus on that and all the topics that underlay that, I realized that it was in Lewiston that I learned what a school community really felt like, the things that were there. And it was at Whitman Elementary with you and all of those teachers and the parents that I really kind of finally understood what that could feel like and be for families, in our education system.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to talk about this because if we talk about it and we tell people what it looks like, what it feels like, and talk about all the things in public education, the good, the frustrating, the hard, all the things, then we can recognize what's great. We can see where we need to improve and then, just move forward for our kids.
Absolutely.
Okay. So all of that, I will just say, I'm going to start with this, which is a story I've told when people hear, like, if you've ever heard me say, my principal friend told me, it would be this man sitting across the table from me.
I love that.
So I'll never forget, you're a principal of the elementary school. I first kind of saw you, like back to school night. I had 3 kids in the elementary school. I had my little toddler in tow. And I see you standing at the intersection right in the opening of the building. Like you walk in the building, there's an intersection where you can go straight to the gym. You can go right to most of the classrooms, left to a few other ones.
Right.
And you're standing there and I see student after student, parent after parent coming in and like, you're there. And I'm like, I wonder who that guy is. I wonder who that guy is, and I find out you're the principal and I shake your hand. You're like super friendly with the kids. Hey kiddos,
Yep.
and, then I meandered down to the classrooms and at some point during the year, I was like, well, I've been in a lot of parent groups. So what do we have here at Whitman Elementary? Oh, we've got PTAs. Okay, I'll go. So I go and I'm a part of it and I'm volunteering at the school. And the really cool thing was that like you were this really involved principal in a way that was like, hey, I want you to be a part of this community that we have here, like just super inclusive. And then it was later, after I became the PTA president, I was at the school a lot and I loved it. And I got to bring my little toddler with me. You guys were so kind to let me bring my toddler with me.
You know what the best part about that is? Millie is still your voice message on your phone. It's the same one. It is the cutest thing in the world. If you ever call Alexis, you get Millie. And she was probably, what, 4?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think she was 4. Yeah, I don't have the heart to like delete that.
I wouldn't delete that in a million years.
So I'm, I get to know you and, come in and I'm asking you different conversations about how you kind of got started. Cause I'm curious, like, who is this like principal here who's really created something that this is the first time I'm experiencing it with my kids.
Sure.
And I ask you like, okay, you're this, elementary school principal, like, did you get any like advice? Like, how do you know what to do? And how do you know, like, why are you on that corner all the time? Like every morning and every afternoon, I see you out on that corner.
Yep.
And so do you remember what you told me?
Oh, you better help me.
Well, you said your friend gave you the advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. So there was actually we had a district, we held our own conference, if you will, and a gentleman came in. His name is Baruti Kafele, and he's nationally known. He travels all over the country, hundreds of miles a year. And he said, if you're not leading from the front of your building outside every morning and at the end of the day, you're not leading your building. And it literally changed everything I did. I mean, I was always, when I was at the high school, as an assistant principal, I'd be out front. When I was at the alternative school, I would be out in the parking lot because the kids drove and the buses dropped off. And so I always paid attention to that. But until he said that, I never realized, why are you in the building? Why are you not, or why are you in the back? Or why aren't you where you're supposed to be? So I started literally standing in the crosswalk. We didn't have a crossing guard then, and they do now, which I think is really cool. But it was just a street that didn't really need one, and so I became kind of the crossing guard, and I would open the door for kids getting out of the car and good morning and high five them as they come across the crosswalk, and it just became my place. And now 13 years later, it's still my place. I'm still in the front of my middle school. I'm still at the bus stop at the end of the day. And it just changed it changed my whole perspective. And parents started to realize, hey, he's approachable. Hey, he's the guy that we need to go to. And I would stand out there because there were parents that I couldn't find. I would be looking for parents who maybe I needed to schedule an IEP with, or just to sit down and talk about behaviors, or and say, hey, we have a food bank. Could we help you? And some of those folks, the only way I could find them and get a hold of them is if they pulled up in front. And so that became my home in the morning and then in the afternoon. And it literally changed how I led my building.
Yeah, I remember one time, and this actually happened multiple times. I would come into the school at the end of the day, and I needed to talk to you about something. So you're like, oh yeah, come on in. So we'd go into your office and be there at the end of the day, just kind of chatting about a few different things. Here I am, the PTA president, and then I was also on the school board, right? So we're talking, and I just want to describe a couple of things that I saw, because I think that this is like this. Anyways, at one point, several times there would be a young child that walked into the room. Mm-hmm. And that young kid would walk in and they were so excited to show you whatever was on that piece of paper. Yep. And what was on that piece of paper?
There was all kinds of different things. Kids would bring me their writing samples because I was a writing teacher. And so I would be very careful of I would congratulate them on how well they did, or it could be a drawing. I still have stacks of drawings that they made. But it was always something. One of my students was in a wheelchair, and he could open my door. He was 4 years old. He was in my preschool, and he could roll right in. One time he rolled in while the superintendent was sitting there, and she's like, oh, I guess, this child is way more important than me. And she just got up and left, and Briggs, just rolled right. He's back now. I have him again in my middle school, which is super cool, but he just rolled right in, and he needed to show me his homework. So it became that relationship of the kids were so important, and they are the most important thing. And so I just love I get to I have the greatest job in the world.
So I remember like there were a couple of times where kids would come in and it was like the end of the day, they're checking in with you because of behavior.
The check in and check out. Yeah. So part of PBIS is in tier 2, we have check in and check out forms.
Will you say what PBIS is?
So positive behavior interventions and supports. It's a nationwide kind of a system of behavior management. Basically, the theory is if you use positive reinforcement more than you use negative. So we like to say we're going to compliment you 7 times a day, at least at a minimum. And, it could be, oh, you cut your hair, it looks so handsome. Or, oh, those are beautiful shoes. And, oh, the dress you're wearing is so nice. Your handwriting is so improved. I saw your spelling test. Oh my gosh, you did so much better this time. I'm so proud of you. And so we just literally pile on positives. And then part of it is if students are kind of progressing with some behaviors, in tier 2, we would create a form called the check-in and check-out form. And so each part of their day in elementary school is broken up into 4 parts of their day. They would get comments from the teacher on how they did. And then the check-out part, they would come to me, and then I would get to read their checkout form. And if they had a really great day, I would just go nuts about it. And we'd celebrate, and there might be candy involved or whatever. A couple of students, that really did really well after, say, a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, we would walk down the street to McDonald's for lunch. It's only a couple of blocks. And so we would do things like that. So the checkout was making sure that we really celebrated the positive behaviors. And so I got to celebrate with them. And if I wasn't there, of course, my secretary, Rhonda, she would just, make the biggest deal of it that she could. And it really worked. PBIS is a great system. It absolutely works. And little kids, especially elementary age students, just loved it. And there would be sometimes a lineup of 4 or 5 kids. Here's my form. And then I'd sign it. They take it home. Mom and dad get to see it. Great day, whatever. And it just changed behaviors. So,
and I got to see a lot of those happy faces as they would come in. It was almost as if part of that experience for them, from my perspective, was part of the reward was the joy of being able to interact with their principal that they knew was supporting them. Yeah. That was super cool. I mean, I love seeing that as a parent. And then when like the bell would ring or you'd notice like a minute, you'd look at me and you'd be like, come with me outside. I gotta get outside. Like we can just, wrap this up out here. And I was like, okay. So I'd walk out with you and I'd, be out there with you a minute or two as the kids were leaving. And then I just would be like, see ya, cause you were in the zone of, talking with the kids. Yeah. And as as a parent, it always just made me so joyful to see. I loved that.
Well, thank you. And that's literally the best part of my day. Currently, I live 30 minutes away, so I'll drive to my middle school. It takes me 30 minutes, literally 30 minutes on the nose to get there. And, I'm really quiet in the morning. I'm pretty low key. And then the zone, like you say, oh, kids are here, outside we go. And then the fist bumps and the high fives start and the good mornings and just, meeting and greeting parents as they drive by. You get into the zone, and then all of a sudden that quiet, early morning goes away, and then I'm with the kids. It's the best part of my day.
I know. I'm not quite ready to move away from this because I want to describe something else I saw. I was just up in Lewiston a couple of times this last year, and one was at the sometime like last fall. I was up or something, and I had a little bit of time before I needed to be somewhere else. So I was like, I'm going to go see where Tim is at this middle school. It wasn't a middle school that my kids had gone to. Right. And so I kind of drive up and I'm like, oh, where's Tim? And like, there you are on the corner with the kids at the bus. There was a few that still needed to go. So there you are, I see you. You're like, oh, hang on a second. You finish your thing. You come over, you're talking to me. And now we're just walking down the sidewalk back towards the school. And while we're doing that, it feels like walking with a celebrity. I'm just gonna say, because people are coming up and they're talking to you. Guy passes in this little pickup truck. He's like blasting some music I've never seen before, and he's like, yeah, Tim, and you're like, yeah, so and so, and like love the music, And I'm just like, and one of the things that I'm observing is, every single one of these parents look different. It's obvious to me that their socioeconomic status is different. And yet the way that you are interacting with them is consistent, which is just totally engaged. You're a parent. I'm part of the school. We're in it together.
Yeah. You know, it's the guy that drove by is Jim. He's the head of our Young Life program. It's a religious outreach group that works with our students. And he was playing Kiss, by the way, the greatest rock band of all time. Everybody knows I'm a Kiss fan. So he goes by. Yeah, the guy's crazy. He's hilarious. The key, I think, to parents, I think sometimes because of social media, I talked about this at the PTA conference on Friday. Principals kind of get leery and they get worried, and so, to be honest, we almost get scared sometimes. It's like, oh, there's that parent that's going to blast me on social media or say something negative. And I try to just I don't dwell on that kind of stuff. If I see a parent, I go out of my way to make sure I talk to every single one of them. And because I want them to know that I'm approachable, and I want them to know that if they ever have a problem, if they come to me first, we can usually solve it before it blows up. And meeting and greeting them is, somebody said you treat everybody like they're your best friend. Well, they are. There's no reason not to. And it doesn't matter what you drive. It doesn't matter how clean your clothes are. It doesn't matter. To me, they're my parents of my kids, and I'm going to treat them with the utmost respect. I just love, I'm like the Walmart greeter. I greet everybody, welcome to Sacagawea Middle School. And I try to engage every single parent that I see in conversation, because then they get to know me. And then if they do have issues, or if anything needs to be solved or resolved, they know they can come to me and talk to me. Oh, it's that guy waving at me in the morning, or it's that guy I see at the bus stop after school. I think they feel more comfortable that way. And I learned that I'll be honest, I learned that a long time ago from my parents. My dad is the most social human being on the planet. He'll just start talking to people in the checkout stand at the grocery store. And I learned that from him. My mom's very outgoing, but those were the skills I learned from them. And they pay dividends. We talked about it, Whitman, earlier. You were saying we're really a family. And I tried to build Whitman into a family, and it worked. And now Sacagawea Middle School is I feel it's the same way. So meeting and greeting people is so important to me. It's the best part of my day. And I don't care if they're sixth graders or grandparents. I try to go out of my way to make sure I make everyone feel welcome in my building.
It's one of my favorite things, just hands down one of my favorite things. So there's a couple of things that I want to make sure I touch on, because I think they're so good for administrators and parents to hear. And there are a couple of different concepts. So one of them is, when you were at Whitman, you had a social worker who did things differently. And one of the things that she did differently was a story you told me about how she said something to the effect of hey, Tim, I have to make a house visit. Will you come with me? And you were like, yeah. And you were telling me this later that you literally went with her to this house with 2 grocery bags in hand. Yep. So will you share do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So Jennifer Wallace, she would split her time between 2 schools. And one day she came in, and Jennifer's tough. I mean, she's a tough cookie. She doesn't cry. She doesn't show emotion very much. And she came into my office and she was crying. And she said, I just came from a house, and the only thing in the refrigerator was a half tub full of margarine. That's it. There was nothing, literally nothing else. And she said, we're going to start a food pantry. I'm like, yes, ma'am. I just, she was so intense, and I'm, and I was just starting out at the elementary. I'd never knocked on someone's door before. And so she said, well, we're going to start one. And so we did. And it went on social media. And one of my teachers, Allison Parker, her husband, Tim, is the fire department union president. And all of a sudden, Rosars was putting on a food drive for us. And I thought, this is so cool. We're going to get $500 worth of groceries to start our food pantry. We got 7 pickup trucks the backs of these pickup trucks, and we had to put them in our janitor's office. We didn't even know where to put the food. We got so much, and people were so crazy about it. And so, yeah, Jennifer literally said, "We're going to go on a home visit. Are you ready?" And I'm like, "Sure." I thought, I'm tough. I'm a big guy. I have no idea what I'm doing right now. And so she drove me to this house kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we went in and we met a grandmother, and we took her groceries, and I talk about moving out into the front of my building and changing my career. The home visit, Jennifer Wallace's home visit, taught me that that's how you really bring those families in. And so we started, that was the first one. And I don't know how many hundreds of them we've made since that time. But Jennifer, that was her thing. We went to places, oh man, I worked on an ambulance as a volunteer for 27 years. And so I would go to places that were kind of scary, but I always had law enforcement. Didn't have law enforcement. We'd knock on doors, and, we always took groceries because people always need food. And her program is now turned into what we call the hub. She has 2 other social workers working with her. You can go get milk, bread, cheese, eggs, all the groceries you need, laundry, clothing, winter coats. You can get whatever you need. And that's how it all started, with her walking into the office with tears in her eyes saying, "We're going to start a food pantry." And from that, we started those home visits. And I took my son Dylan and his best friend Reagan's his girlfriend, sorry, Truman. And I said, "Hey, we got to do a home visit." So I took them, and I was out visiting these people, and they were in the pickup. And pretty soon there's this little beep on the horn, and I look over, and Dylan's just waving me back. And I said, "Oh, okay, I got to go." And Dylan goes, "Dad, we're scared. We got to get out of this neighborhood." And I'm like, okay. I mean, there were some places that it was just, they were scary to go to. But it didn't deter me, it didn't deter me. And it was Jennifer Wallace who taught me to do that. And so from then on, we just go knock on doors, and we would have kids, would disappear. This was before COVID. So, there wasn't, kids didn't stay home or any of that kind of stuff. But if we couldn't find a student, we'd go knock on the door. And literally she taught me, take food. Mm-hmm. "Hey, I brought you some groceries. Didn't know if you need them. Oh, if you don't, I can take them back. But take food, and, they might invite you in. And if not, you stay out on the porch and make sure that they know that you care about their kid, you love them, and you want them back in your school."
So what was it about that relationship that you had with her that when she came into your office that day, you knew to say yes?
She worked so hard, and Jennifer had been our teacher of the year as well. She had a great reputation. The fact that I got to work with her was a privilege. And I knew how hard she worked, and I knew what she did for families and kids, and I'd never seen her emotional before. And it's like, okay, she means business. Yep. Yes. I just started shaking my head. Yes. Yep. We'll do that. We'll do that. Our business manager at the time she was the first donation. She wrote us a $500 check. And I thought, okay, we're going to get some bread and, maybe some cereal and milk, and this is going to be really cool. And no, all of a sudden we had to I had to get maintenance involved, and they had to literally redesign our back storage area. We brought in refrigerators. One of the local appliance stores donated a washer and dryer so parents could literally come into our school through the back door where it's not embarrassing. We had laundry soap, dryer sheets, the whole bit. They could wash their clothes, they could dry their clothes, fold them, take them. We had diapers, we had wipes, we had, you name it, we had it. Hygiene, dental offices were giving us toothbrushes and toothpaste. It was crazy. The Knights of Columbus would show up, they're all buddies of mine, and they would show up with winter coats. Like, they're going to bring us 10 winter coats. No, it'd be like 150 winter coats. They would raise money, and then they would go out after the winter season when, Walmart and everybody's selling their coats for like $10, and they would literally be piled up in our library. before we could put them away. And we just kept having to move. This thing kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's in the old high school, in the old cafeteria and teacher's lounge. And it's like 3 rooms. Wow. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's huge. And parents, we have a gentleman at the grocery outlet in Lewiston. He just brings in pallets full of stuff. And so, I mean, it's literally, it's not the Idaho Food Bank, because we have that too right by my school. But it is tremendous. And they literally will take bags and bags of groceries out and deliver them. But Jennifer was that person. I had so much respect for her. And when she came in upset, I was paying attention because I just had never seen it before. And she said, I'm not going to walk into another house where they only have a half a tub of margarine. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. And we got to work. And it happened in a month. It was the fastest growing thing I've ever been a part of.
I think, I mean, I was there when that happened. I was at Whitman when all of this unfolded. I remember when they were like, you were telling me, hey, oh my gosh, I want to show you this thing. We're going to put it in a washer and dryer back here. Like, we got to get the,
we had to drill through concrete. The maintenance guys were ready to kill me.
Yeah. And the thing that I remember thinking that was like so cool, as I'm like, as a parent, looking at all this stuff was like, one, here, like, wow, I'm like watching a principal get excited about like someone else's idea. And this principal trusts this person to carry these things out. And then this principal is like this cheerleader for, this social worker and telling people about it and using your community to spread the word, right? You're talking about a teacher, Mrs. Parker, who's got a husband who works the fight, right? You're connecting all of these people to make it happen. One person, I would say that Jennifer was the driver, right? Yep. The social worker, but like not one person was shouldering everything to try to make this happen. It became a group, like a team effort. Yep. It just felt like overnight in what I was, seeing and observing.
It literally happened that way. I think I started with a social media post. I put something out on Facebook and I think I had like 37 friends at that time or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
What was really crazy about it is how fast it grew. But there was these 2 ladies that worked at Rosars. Well, Rosars is employee owned, so it's a union, right? So they're part of when all the unions get together, like it's the Clearwater Paper and the fire department and Rosars, and they all got together. So Tim Parker, he has this meeting and he goes, hey, my wife's principal and social worker, they're going to start this food bank. And the Rosars ladies are like, yeah, well, we'll do a food drive. That's the 7 pickup loads. I'm not kidding you. They called me because I'd gone down early in the day to support it, and, then I had to get back and do lunch and lunch duty and all that kind of stuff. And I remember about 2:15, they called and they said, can you come up and help us? And I'm thinking, sure. I have my pickup at a little Tacoma, and I drive up there and it's like, I don't know how we're going to get this to my school. And so they called their husbands, and all of a sudden these husbands are pulling up in their pickups and they're literally loading these groceries. And it was emotional because it's like, I don't have any, I don't know where to put it. We didn't have anywhere to put this stuff. So my poor custodian, Karen, who was the greatest lady in America, and she was the classified staff member of the year that year. And she was wonderful. She's getting ready to retire. She shows up to work at 6:00 the next morning with a note on her door saying, sorry, we have nowhere to put this stuff. And she walked in and like there were groceries stacked on her desk and, up in the storage. And we literally had, it happened so fast. That was a month after the margarine incident. 1 month we had, I don't know how many thousands, about $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 worth of groceries in 1 month. And then it just got possessed. Hey, what if we got laundry? And so I called the maintenance guy and I said, hey, can you put in a washer and dryer? And he's like, if I drill through concrete? I'm like, okay. I don't know anything about that stuff. So you can? And he's like, I guess. So and here's the spiritual thing about it. When you clean your house out of, like, you declutter, We decluttered. We had to declutter. So then it was so bad. We had this, it was an old elementary school built in the 50s, right? And so there was a stage, which I still wish there was a stage.
I know, yeah, same.
Yeah, I love the old schools with the stages, but they'd closed up the stage. They put a wall there, and then they used the back. The stage was actually storage, and they built these little wooden, kind of like you would see in a storage facility, little wooden, boxes, if you will, with doors, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we just took away all the storage and we decluttered. So we threw away stuff that hadn't been used. Like it was materials that would have been used when I was in elementary school in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. So we loaded 2 gigantic moving trucks that the district owns, and we took stuff to the dump. We filled them to the brim. I mean, they were full. And so then all of a sudden we kept moving this food in, and all this stuff, and laundry and diaper. And then we got into diapers, and we had all the different sizes of diapers, and we had wipes, and we had, Desitin, and we had all this cool stuff. And so people were really helpful. We're making a difference, right? Well, then they're like, well, where are you going to store stuff? I don't know. So maintenance came in and built a mezzanine. Yes. In like 2 days, because we had to have it. We had nowhere to put stuff. And now all of a sudden we can't have PE because all the stuff's out in the gym. And it was a nightmare for a little bit, but everybody pitched in. Mm-hmm. And the superintendent, everybody got into it. And all of a sudden we had rebuilt this whole entire storage area that used to be the stage. And it's still, it's still that way. But it was literally one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of in my entire life, because literally there's a family with only margarine. We're going to have a food pantry. Okay. Social media post. Lady from the district office comes down. She's our business manager. She gives me $500. Here you go. There's a start. Okay. Now we have money in the bank. So we started this account, and then Rosar's just blew the doors off the place. And then we were scrambling. We were stores would go out of business. We would go buy their clothing racks, for like $5. And so we had places we could hang up winter coats, and we had a rack of just shoes and winter boots, and we had everything. And it was a movement that I still get chills when I think about it, because it happened. It was spontaneous. And people, the 2 Rosars ladies would call me, hey, we haven't done a food drive in like 6 months, so we're going to do on Tuesday. I'll be there. That's just how it went. And then people started, we'd get checks. There was a gentleman, I will never forget this. It was a chain and bolt company out in North Lewiston. And a lot of my kids lived out there. There's some trailer parks and things like that. And they lived out there. And my secretary, you remember Rhonda, such a nice, just a super nice lady. She comes in and she goes, there's a man here and he's really mad. And I'm like, I said, where's he from? You always want the intel before you go. And she goes, I've never seen him before, but he has a business in North Lewiston and he wants to talk to you and he looks really mad. And I'm thinking, okay, it's right by the bus stop. I bet my kids were throwing rocks, you think the worst.
Right.
And I go out and I invite him into my office, Mr. Personable, Yeah. And I invite him in, and it's January. And he looks at me and he goes, there's kids at the bus stop by my business. And I'm like, here it comes. They're throwing rocks. I know they're throwing rocks. And he goes, some of them don't have winter coats. And he slaps a check down on my desk for $1,000. He goes, buy them coats. Yes, sir. I'm still scared, and so of course it has his name and address on the check, right? Mm-hmm. And so we did. So then all of a sudden the coat thing started. That's how it started. And so I said, well, we were going to want to send you a thank you or something. And he's like, nope, don't need no thanks, buy kids' coats. And he left. And I'm doing the, I'm trying not to get all emotional with this big tough dude standing in front of me. And, he's probably, I don't know, he might've been old enough to be my dad. And so to get him back, we bought him a Whitman sweatshirt. And I walked out, and of course I go into his office with Dylan, my son, who's probably, 10. And I'm standing there, and he didn't really recognize me at first. Because it was a Saturday or something. I'm in a baseball cap and sweatshirt or whatever. And I said, excuse me, sir, we held the drawing and you had a raffle ticket and you won the raffle. And I hand him the sweatshirt and he looks at it and he goes, I didn't buy no raffle ticket. And I said, I know. And he goes, thanks. And a few weeks later, I saw him in town with the shirt on. I was just like, it just makes your heart melt. After that, I think the next year it was $1,500. He just walked in and put it on the table. And I think then after that, there was a check for $2,000.
Wow.
And he just kept doing it. It was amazing, so it was all about Jennifer. She said, we're going to do this. And it's like, okay. And we did it. But it literally started with a Facebook post. It was like, hey, we're starting a food pantry. Love some donations. If you got anything to drop off. It was really cool. Then we got refrigeration. Mm-hmm. We ended up getting refrigerators. So if you came, we could give you 3 days food. We had 3-day boxes, and it included eggs, bread, milk, and cheese. So we had cold things as well. And then we started getting meat, and it was nuts.
It was so incredible.
Yeah.
Like I got to be there for some of it. And then I was actually just up there recently because I wanted to go back into the PTA closet and see a couple of things. And, I got the key to go back in there, and sure enough, like all the stuff is there,
Mm-hmm.
and to your point, like it's, gone to the old high school now. Right. And that to me just like really represents the essence of like the possibility of a school community.
Yep.
Like the things that can happen. There was something else that happened at the elementary school before I move on to something else. Sure. Was that I'm the PTA president. You and I have like developed this relationship, right? Where, gosh, the other day at the PTA convention, you're kind of talking about, as the, PTA leaders in your communities and, at your schools. And, this is applicable for any parent group, PTO, booster, whatever it is, going in and developing a relationship with that principal is it's really key. Showing up and asking like, hey, we're these parents. We want to be involved. How can we help you? What kind of, we want to build a relationship with you. We want it to be supportive. We don't want it to be a draw, like we don't want to have those negative margins there, all of those things. So we have this relationship, at this point, I feel like we're friends.
Yep.
And I knew so many of the principals, and this was like in the summertime, school is going to start in a couple weeks. I see you and you're like, hey, Alexis, I want to invite you to come with us on this thing that I'm taking the teachers on. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I actually felt really special as a parent to be able to be included in this. And so you tell me what this is, and I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, and most of these teachers are my friends too.
Correct.
And I get on this big yellow school bus, and all the teachers are there. School has not started yet. And there you are in the very front seat with your microphone, and you're taking us on a tour of where all the kids are in the district. And this was a moment for me that I will never forget. We're driving around and you're telling us different things about different parts of our school boundaried area. Yep. And we drive up to this one area and you ask the bus driver to stop. We stop. You point down a street and you start describing the kids who live on this street. And I will never forget thinking like, this man knows these things about these kids and he loves them, and he has like, look at all these teachers here. And that was so profound. That moment was so profound.
So that became, I was really struggling with making sure you have to know where your kids come from. And Whitman is it was such an interesting combination of demographic. We had students who lived in low-income housing in really rundown trailer parks. And we also had students that lived in $500,000 homes. And it was, I just wanted to make sure my staff understood where because when you get behaviors, you get a student. I got to teach a class at the college, at Lewis Clark State College for a long time. And I would always talk about, knowing where your students come from. And one of the scenarios that I would always give is, the little girl comes in, she's a second grader. It was a true scenario, but I didn't, of course, put names. She cannot sit still in the morning. Their morning group, when they sit around and they talk about their day, what they're going to do. And she just couldn't sit still. She became a behavior issue. I mean, she couldn't keep her hands to herself. She couldn't, nothing. And come to find out, the little girl hadn't eaten since lunch the day before, when we finally figured it out. And so we had kids that were in that situation. And so I decided one day that I was going to take you and my staff on a bus tour. And because I would go to these places and I'd get out of my car and, oh, Mr. Sperber's here, and all the kids would come and see me or whatever, and parents and people would start to wave, and, they got used to me. I went enough that people got used to me. And the street you're referring to, it made the news before we knew about it. There was drug paraphernalia at the bus stop, needles, that kind of stuff. And so Dylan and I, poor Dylan, we went down with rubber gloves and garbage sacks and we cleaned up the bus stop, because they literally, it was gross. So I decided I wanted my staff to see, because they sometimes would struggle with these behaviors, and a lot of times, and this was a wonderful group of teachers, but sometimes teachers get frustrated too, and they'd be like, God, can you just send the kid home? No, because I know what home is like. And so we would try to keep kids in intervention, or in my office. I had a little desk in the corner of my office. But behaviors would mount. And I realized that sometimes kids of trauma, kids who live in trauma, kids who live in just really rough situations act out. And I always said this, a student who is not loved at home comes to school to be loved. And sometimes they don't know how to be loved. And so their behaviors are very, they act out, they're very overt. They do things that are they'll drive you crazy when you're trying to teach fractions. But they can't help it. And so I wanted my staff to see where our kids really, truly came from, including the $500,000 houses, right? Mm-hmm. And so that street has a low-income apartment unit. And we had about 7 kids that lived there at the time. And then there were students of ours that lived down the street as well. And, we I don't know, 3 or 4 different times we took that tour, but we went out on those buses, and my staff really got to see. And I knew, Billy lives in that house, and Susie lives in that house, and this is the trailer that so and so lives in, and it was profound. And they got to see a different side of our kids, and I wasn't doing it as a shock value. I just wanted them to know that it's rough, and it made a huge difference. I've suggested it to a lot of folks. If you ever get a chance, go on, take these kind of tours, because it really changed the way we did business at Whitman, and our staff really got to understand, man, this is why we have a food pantry. This is why this child, we were sneaky. Because we had laundry, we would get a kid clothing and have them change at school, and then wash their clothes, and then have them change back into their clean clothes, and then go home. Because some folks didn't want, any help, but, the poor kid hadn't had a change of clothes or clean clothes in a week and a half. And so we did things like that just to make sure kids had clean clothes, or we would, like I said, we'd show up with food and maybe a winter coat, or whatever. And most of the time we were welcomed, but sometimes we weren't.
Yeah.
But the bus tour was a big deal.
Well, I was on the school board at the time too. Mm-hmm. So here I am, the PTA president, and then I also got to be on the school board. Yep. And so as a school board member, it was also really eye-opening for me to be in that position, to be able to get to understand the district that I was on a team working to govern. And it was, really helpful for me in that way. So as I have gotten to know you, one of the things that is super, and I was talking to Clinton about this just yesterday, was that you have been a principal or an administrator at every school level, the alternative school. Like you went from principal to the alternative school to athletic director at the high school to principal of the elementary school to then principal of the middle school.
Right.
And, in a minute, we're going to talk about how you're now about to be the superintendent.
Scary.
But one of the things that I think is something else that actually occurred at the elementary school, and I think that you probably did it at the middle school too, was that you're an athletic director at the high school, and you're a team player here in the district.
Sure.
You go where you're asked to go, where your skills are, those types of things. Though I do want to note, because I do know that this is happening in some districts where they don't keep administrators like vice principals in the buildings very long, because air quotes, they want them to have all this experience everywhere. Right. But in a way, it's can be hindering to culture building and relationship building, in that way. So anyways, I just am pointing that out, that's not what was happening here, that you were at these places for a good, substantial amount of time.
Yeah. So, I was teaching high school English and social studies, was the football coach and athletic director in a little town of Colton, Washington. It was 8 miles from where I live in Genesee. And I taught there for 9 years. But in the meantime, while I was there, I got my master's degree at Washington State in educational leadership, because I wanted to be a principal someday. But I always wanted to be an alternative school principal, because those are my kids. Those are the kids I relate to. And, I was a jock in high school, but those are the kids I always kind of gravitated to. I always got along with. So I wanted this job, and I got hired for it. I was I was excited. I went in, we closed campus. No more, you couldn't leave campus because bad things were happening off campus. And a bunch of kids quit right off the bat, and I thought, I'm fired. So they literally dropped out of school. About a month later, they all came back. And so that really built up, I was rolling, I'm in my first, I'll never forget. I called my dad one time and I said, "Hey Dad, somebody wrote something bad about me in the boys' bathroom on the stall." And he's like, "Oh, you've arrived. Yeah. You're finally a principal when somebody writes bad about you." But, so we're on a roll, and we're building that family. We're building that trust. We had impromptu staff meetings in the principal's office. People would be sitting on the floor. We'd just after school debriefing, how our day went or whatever. But they couldn't find an athletic director at the high school. And so in the end of my first year, the boss came in, and she's my hero, Joy Rapp's best superintendent on the planet. She says, "You're going to need to apply to be the athletic director." And so I did, for her, because I didn't want to disappoint her. And sure enough, they moved me to the high school. So I was assistant principal athletic director for 5 years. And I learned under Bob Donaldson, and Lance Hansen was my assistant. Now he's the superintendent I'm about to replace, and Bob was the superintendent before him. And so we ended up there, and we always like to say the golden age of Lewiston High School, because, we think we're that cool.
Sure.
Yeah. And we tease, of course, the new administration. Well, they're not new now. Two of them are leaving. So we built a pretty good deal there. I mean, we had a good family. We were doing really well. The problem was I was a dad, and I had littles, and my kids were going to school in Genesee, where my wife was teaching and where we live. And I missed things. I was missing, Dylan would be like, "Hey Dad, you missed the last 3 Christmas concerts." That's not true. One of them I was Santa Claus, and you didn't know it was me. But I just missed everything. I missed a whole season of softball one time. I never saw Sammy play, never, not once. And so I went to the superintendent, Joy, and I just said, "Hey, I got to do something else. I've been there 5 years. I need to do something else. I'm not a parent. I'm a lousy dad." And she said, "Well, we have an elementary school that, they'd had, I think, 3 principals in 4 years, and it was kind of in a mess." And I'm thinking, okay, I'll apply for that. I'm going to go for 2. Elementary school has little kids that want to hug you, and they have snot, and they don't wash their, I don't want to, okay, fine. It gets me home. I'll go be an elementary school principal. They hired me. No elementary experience whatsoever. And I'm like, oh God, I'm going to stay 2 years, and I'll literally leave the district then. I'll have a building under my belt, all this other experience. Someone will hire me. A month into it, I fell in love. Stayed 9 years.
I remember you told me, you're like, so just Alexis, I just want you to know, I never want to leave this building. I'm going to retire from here.
That was
You
the
know,
plan.
here I am on the school board. You're like, I'm never leaving this building.
So, I just, there's no way I was going to make it at an elementary, and literally the greatest job you could ever have. And I stayed 9 years, and I would have stayed. And then as Bob was retiring and Lance was going to be the superintendent, Lance is sneaky. He walked in on a Friday and he said, "Hey, Phil from the middle school retired." Because I'd missed the meeting. There was a meeting the day before. I missed the whole thing. I was gone doing something. And I'm like, "What?" And he said, yeah, we got to find a leader that can really build culture at Sacagawea. And got up and walked out and never said another word.
That sounds like Lance.
I'm like, what a jerk. So, so he walks out. And so finally, I don't sleep that night. And I'm like, I know what he meant. So I text him on Sunday. And I said, "Are you coming over tomorrow to talk about the Sacagawea job?" And he goes, "I'll be there at 7:00. I mean, Lance never responds immediately. Mm-hmm. The return text, I think he was typing as I was typing, kind of a thing. And he said, "I'll be there at 7:00. And so he came over and he said, "Yeah, what do you think?" And I said, "Oh man, I don't know. I'm at Whitman Elementary School, the greatest school in America. I don't really want to leave." And so he goes, "Well, I'll come back tomorrow." And so he comes back on Tuesday. And I said, "Hey, there's a board meeting at noon on Thursday. What are they meeting about?" And he goes, "You." I'm like, "What about me?" He goes, "Moving to SAC." And I'm like, oh God, I better tell my wife. So by the next Monday, I was introduced to the Sacagawea staff, and I moved there. It's been a great 4 years. We moved for purpose, and I think, well, like I talked about at the PTA conference, on my door it doesn't say principal. We call ourselves the culture keepers, and it's all about school culture. It's all about being out front at the bus stop and doing all those things. Making teachers feel valued, and making students feel valued, and families feel valued, and we literally thrive on that. And so changing cultures and buildings, making it a positive place for everyone to be, it's really happened again. So I kind of and I always believe in this. Every time I change jobs, I get to reinvent myself. I get to be different. And now I'm really going to have to reinvent myself. But Sacagawea has just been a great place. And I got to do it at a different level. I remembered back to my early days in Lapway when I was teaching middle school kids and how fun they are. Middle school kids are hilarious. People are afraid of middle school. It's like, I don't get that. Middle school kids, if you love them, and you just value them and literally make eye contact with them. My big thing is you can't, 8th graders are not allowed to walk in the door without a fist bump with the principal, because I stand there and I sing obnoxious songs and make a fool out of myself, and they're all like, "Dude, this guy's a mess." But they're all smiling when they walk in the door. And so it's been a great, it's been 19 years now, going on 20. And it's the moves. I was always nervous about the moves, and then the moves always worked out. Mm-hmm. So,
well, a couple of things. One, when you talk about those middle school ages, I just, kind of had the thought that it's like, because I have a middle schooler, it's my youngest, and they're like, that's just like one of the most awkward phases of life.
Yes.
And through my conversations with all of my children, it is very apparent to me that every kid thinks that everyone's looking at them, and people are judging me. They think I'm weird. I feel so uncomfortable. I'm, all the things, or there's people, some of those kids are overcompensating, right? I'm like so cool and tough, but inside, they're kind of struggling. And so to your point that like, hey, you're here as an adult and you're not like, you are confident enough in yourself to be as goofy or as fun or as serious or as loving or show as much value towards those children as you want because you feel solid about who you are as an adult. So when those awkward teenagers, tweens really are showing up at the door and they're like, this dude is crazy. You're like, yeah, I am,
And here we go.
Yeah, here we go. I mean, that is significant. I think that's so important because we are kind of like entering this phase of, you even said it at the PTA convention where you were like, principals in Idaho are only staying in the profession for 3 years.
Yep.
And I want to talk about this because when I traveled the state last summer and I met with parents, there were 2 things that were like on the top of their list. One was technology and kids.
Yes.
And the second one was administrators, like their issue with administrators. And I remember when you and I were talking one day about how you had come down to Whitman and we were kind of diving into some of the issues that Whitman had.
Right.
And one of the things that you described was that the parents had kind of come in, that PTA had kind of come in and was kind of overrunning the school a little bit. The teachers were kind of, back in their area and the principal hadn't drawn a good enough boundary.
Right.
So what did you do to help draw that boundary, but also develop a relationship with parents?
This is one of my favorite stories. When I took over, there was a file. The principal had been there for 6 or 7 months and then they were kind of phasing him out. And I don't know how all that worked. I didn't get involved in all of that, but there was a file of parents who had no contact orders with the school. They weren't allowed on campus. Even though their children went to school there, they were not allowed on campus. They were basically restraining orders, if you will. And I'll never forget, I was warned, okay, if you go out to the outside classroom, that's where they're allowed to gather, these parents. And they have these restraining orders, but they could be there, but they couldn't be at the doors to get their, we had all those in elementary school with the outside doors. So you literally let kids out of your building outside the classroom door. And I thought, well, the heck with that. So I walked out the first afternoon right out to the outside classroom and I wandered in and there was this lady who I ended up becoming very good friends with. She became, before you were there, the vice president of the PTA, and she had one of those restraining orders, right?
Yeah.
And God bless her, she passed during COVID, but she was just a wonderful, wonderful person. And she had an EMT hat on. And then there were these other ladies there, this tall redheaded lady that just looked, angry. And her name is Rachel, and she's one of my best friends now.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah. And so this other lady too, and I didn't really know the other lady, but I walked out. I just wandered right out in the middle. I mean, it's just me. That's just the way I do business. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the lady and I said, "Are you an EMT?" And she goes, "I was." And I said, "Oh, I'm an EMT with the Genesee Fire Department. We'll have to talk sometime about that hat. I have a lot of stories." And she goes, "Okay." And then this other lady that had never seen before, she goes, "Were you at summer school a couple of years ago?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "Do you remember my daughter?" And yeah. Well, what I had done, this little girl was struggling with her credits and she wasn't going to graduate. Well, they just weren't looking at the path to graduation the right way. And I said, "Okay, give me your transcripts." And I sat down with the counselor and we reworked her summer school schedule. She graduated on time. And this lady also, I think, had a restraining order or whatever. And she goes, You're the guy that helped my daughter." Flip the switch. And then this redheaded lady is sitting there and she goes, "Well, you know my uncle." And I'm like, "I do? Uncle Frank." "Oh, Frank that works for the school." "Oh, yeah, Frank's one of my favorite people." Well, then all of a sudden I had dialogue. Mm-hmm. Well, it just like I parked for a football game in front of Rachel's house at Bengal Field. And I texted her and I said, "Hey, can I park in front of your house? I can't find a parking spot." She goes, "Yeah, go ahead." I go out. This is 2 years ago. I go out. There's 50 chocolate chip cookies on my windshield and huckleberry jam and all this other stuff. We built relationships. And the lady in the EMT hat, we called her Mo. That was her nickname. We just became friends. And I had her in the office one day and I pulled out that restraining order and I shredded it and threw it in the garbage. and just said, we're not doing this anymore. You're welcome on my campus. Here are the ground rules. And she ended up, she was not only the vice president of our school board, she was on, I think it was Bob at the time, on the superintendent's council. She was on the parents' council that would go meet with the superintendent.
Oh, you mean she was the vice president of the PTA?
Oh, PTA.
Yeah.
PTA.
Mm-hmm.
And then she ended up, it was one of those things where this doesn't work. You can't, and that I learned a lot that day, I learned about me, and just kindness. We do not have to be adversaries. It didn't mean I always got along with those folks, but like with Rachel, last summer I was sitting in her front yard at her son Alex's graduation party. That's just how it happened. We picked huckleberries together in the Blues. She made cupcakes for my daughter's graduation. I mean, but at the time, the principal was the bad guy. And then literally in one shot, that stupid EMT hat that Mo was wearing, she wore all the time. That changed it changed everything. And we created a dialogue to where, hey, principal's not so bad. And then of course from parents aren't so bad either. And you don't have to have those bad relationships. But I do know, and I talked about this at the PTA conference, principals struggle. And I was listening to a gentleman from the State Department. I'm the regional representative for the Idaho Association of Secondary School Principals. And we had him zoom in to our meeting. And he talked about, principals, they're lasting about 3 years right now. And we have a principal support network that the State Department runs. And they have so many people in this mentoring program, so many principals in this mentoring program that there's a waiting list. And so my hope is that we can mentor principals and really keep them in the job, because public education is the greatest thing in the world to me. And we need the right leaders. And that I learned all of that at Whitman Elementary School. I always thought I'd write a book. And
oh my gosh, would you please?
What you learned at Whitman Elementary, what's a Dr. Seuss something on Mulberry Street? What I saw on Mulberry Street, what I learned at Whitman Elementary School.
Yeah.
Because I learned about me a lot. I learned, hey, you can really be a leader, but you have to build those relationships. And that's all I do. My kids won't go to Costco with me because it takes 2.5 hours to get out of the store.
Well, I mean, you said even at the very beginning, well, I think you did. I mean, sometimes I get confused where I hear things, but was it here? Was it somewhere else?
Did he say that?
Did he say that here? That you treat everyone like they're your best friend. And
absolutely.
To me, what that really is, in my mind, is that, I mean, we just had like the Dignity Index come in. I just had her on the show, and it's the Dignity Index is a scale of 1 to 8, like a rating of speech for how people are speaking to each other.
Right.
But what they found in this Dignity Index and in this rating system is that there are a couple of different effects that are occurring, and one of them is a mirror effect, where once you see, like, the bottom 1 through 4 is contempt. It's contemptuous language. It goes 4, then worse down, and then the top 5, 6, 7, 8 is the dignity part, and the speech and getting better and better. And so once people see this in action, then they're mirroring. Then they're kind of looking in the mirror at their own speech.
Right.
And so treating people with dignity in the speech that we have really means looking at people like they're a human being and interacting with them like, hey, this is a person with feelings and has a story and all sorts of stuff. And I think the place sometimes where I struggle as a parent now, because I mean, I wasn't on the school board when you moved from Whitman to SAC. I probably would have been the no vote. I think they did that intentionally after.
They waited till you left.
Yeah, I think they did. They all knew that Alexis was
We've
there.
talked about that.
Yeah. And so but like I've had my own frustrations with principals where I feel like they treat parents with contempt. Here I am. I'm a parent showing up. I want to volunteer, or I have a perspective. It might not be one that you, principal, agree with, but that doesn't mean it's not valid, right? Or this is my kid. And if you're paying attention, you're noticing that I I actually don't think I'm adversarial. Maybe I'm coming off a bit protective of my child, or maybe it's a little bit intimidating that I know things that maybe most parents don't.
Right.
Or even in this scenario, principal, I mean, this was something that happened within this last school year where it was very evident to me and other parents that a teacher probably should have apologized to a group for some things that were said about me. And, I asked to engage with the principal because I wanted to have a conversation, right? Some things had happened and I thought, hey, I'm hearing this secondhand. I want to hear it directly from the principal. Let's have this conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's okay.
Sure.
And the thing that I heard from the principal was, well, I'm never going to force a teacher to apologize. And I thought, whoa, no one's asking anyone to force anyone to do anything, but there's a difference between forcing a behavior of an apology, like forcing an apology versus supporting an apology or looking at the parent and just offering, you know what, this isn't going to play out how you want, but I'm going to sit here and tell you that I'm sorry that it's played out this way. And I'm sorry that you had that experience. And what I'm finding are that there are some principals who are awesome. And I love that. And it makes me so happy for our Idaho kids and our Idaho parents. But it breaks my heart when I hear about stories from parents and I have my own experiences where our Idaho kids and our Idaho parents are not getting these positive experiences with our principals. We know that it happens. So what do you think? I mean, yeah, you're, a part of a networking thing, but what do you think could help bridge some of these, challenges?
So I presented this at the conference. I want to know, here's no shame, right? We have parent-teacher conferences. We beg the parents to fill out the survey that tells us how we're doing. I'm dying to get that information as soon as and what's really cool is like this year, we had more parents fill out the survey than ever before. And it talks about, does my child feel safe at school? Is the school communicating well with us at home about events at school? Does the school communicate about how we can help our kid at home? Is there a caring adult in the building that cares about my child? Is the principal accessible? Those kind of things. And I want that information because I'm constantly striving to do better. And I think principals, and no excuse. I mean, obviously I don't want to make, any excuses. Some of us are obviously better at building relationships than others. And that is the key to it all. Again, if I'm out front waving at you every morning when you drive by, it was neat that one of the representatives from the Lewiston area, when I was speaking, she goes, yep, he's always out on the front, and, you've caught me a few times lately, but I think principals get beaten down a little bit and they get very leery sometimes. And I talked about this at the conference. We get beat up on social media sometimes and it's so bad. I think that's what really chases principals out of the profession. And so and principals are territorial too. You do have to take care of your parent group, but you got to support your teachers. And so they get into this no man's land of how do I do my job effectively without making this side mad and this side mad. And so you kind of play that balancing act. But again, if I were ever to teach principals, the first thing I would talk to them about is building the family culture in your building. And family means the students, the custodians, the parents, the grandparents, the people across the street, the folks who have a bus stop out in front of their home, the whole family, the staff, everybody involved, because those relationships are key. If I have a relationship with a parent and I feel that I have a good relationship with most of my parents, that, one of the survey questions is your principal accessible? We had a 96% approval rating. 96% of our parents agree or strongly agree that Corey Williams, my assistant principal, and I are accessible to them. If we're accessible, we can help solve those kind of problems. I think the number one thing I've probably learned about being a principal is to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened. And I'll have that conversation, but I'm very sorry it happened. And I have no qualms about it. If I think we've done something wrong, I will apologize. And it becomes, it's so mixed now. And again, a lot of things will play out on social media before we even know it's a thing. But I think the one skill principals have to learn, there's a couple. One, crucial conversations.
Yes. That book, go read that book, How to Have Crucial Conversations. That's key.
My little girl's a nurse manager. She's 28 years old up at Kootenai Medical in Coeur d'Alene. And she goes, yeah, Dad, some of the conversations I had, I said, honey, I got a book for you. But learning how to have those tough conversations without getting defensive, without getting upset.
Well, and being able to recognize when someone else is in that flight or freeze or flight mode, right? Like, oh my gosh, they're probably getting really defensive because they don't feel safe in this conversation right now. Right?
And safety is huge, you know, and principals, I'll be honest, there are times when I'm a nervous wreck and I have a pretty good poker face, so I try not to show it, but I get into conversations sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I don't know where this is going to go. And it makes my stomach hurt. You know, I just get really tense. But again, I try to have those relationships already built. I call it it's like putting money in your savings account. The more positive things I say to kids, the more I get to know my parents, the more I greet them, the more I wave at them, the more I welcome them into my building. It's like building a savings account. And sometimes you got to withdraw. And so when a bad thing occurs, I'll never forget this. I was the athletic director. And an incident occurred in sports and some kids got suspended by the coach during a tournament or whatever. And this dad comes into my office and he's like 6'3", you know, I'm a big guy, but I'm not that big. And I'm just like, at any moment that guy could reach across the desk and kill me. And he walks in and his son was one of my favorite kids. And he had just brought me his graduation announcement. And I've got it stuck on the wall behind my desk. Like it's literally right here. And the dad walks in and he's beet red. And you can tell he's, you know, gunning for bear. And he sits down and he goes, he just deflates. And I'm like, are you all right? And he goes, it's hard to be mad at you when my son's graduation announcement is right there. And I didn't do it on purpose. It'd been there for a couple of weeks, but he knew how much his son meant to me and he knew how much I meant to his son. And then all of a sudden the conversation just like, okay, you know, we screwed up and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry this happened, you know, and then we had a great conversation. But it is literally money in the bank. And I think principals are so worried. Okay, I'm just going to admit this because it's really funny now. I can retire in February. I reach my rule of 90. The older the longer my career has gone on and the closer to graduation, the closer to retirement, it's like I've gotten a lot more brave.
Yeah.
You know, but when you're young, let's say you're 45 years old and you're 15 years from retirement or 10 years from retirement, you become guarded because you don't want to lose your job. We love, you know, I've met very few principals that just didn't absolutely love kids and love what they do. Some of us do it differently than others and all of those kind of things. But I think it's really telling. The older I get, you get brave because, you know, if they fire me now, at least I can retire.
Yeah.
But young principals, you know, with like I said, they get attacked on social media and there's no defense. You cannot go back on social media and say, hey, this didn't, you know, I do like it sometimes if I'm getting some negative press, parents will, well, that's not, you don't even know Tim Sperber, you know, or whatever. So I have my defenders out there. Yeah. But it's hard and it's a hard job because you're balancing so many things. You know, you're balancing the chaos of day to day. Did you see the two folks? I think they're from the Boise area at the PTA conference that had the PTA t-shirts on. They were black and green Did you?
I probably.
Big dude.
Oh, okay.
Really
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice folks. I was talking to
Yeah.
them for a while. The backs of their shirts, chaos coordinator.
Yeah.
And I took a picture because it's like, I got to get those shirts.
Yeah.
But I think principals are, I don't know of any of them that don't mean well, but I think they get stuck, literally stuck in the middle. And that's just being honest.
I think you're really nice, because I am going to say there are, I have had a couple of experiences where, from my perspective, there was this one teacher in the school that my kids were going to, and I had learned that this teacher was taking the administration courses to be able to become an administrator. And I experienced this teacher as a longtime sub. A long-term sub. I experienced this teacher as a long-term sub, meaning it wasn't just stuff I was hearing from my kids or other things. And it felt like, from my perspective,
because you were subbing in the building.
I was subbing.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this teacher, I feel like they're on a power trip in here and telling all these kids these things in the hallways. And it was known school-wide that this teacher treated kids well. They were this teacher's favorites, and they were in this particular class. And I just didn't hear it from one set of students. I heard it from a myriad. So like, there's like that one perspective, right? And then I've got this another experience where it's like, this principal is so, I mean, you talk about wanting parents to go to parent teacher conference. I had an experience where I'm there with these teachers. I'm noticing stuff, like I got to pay attention that there's no other parents behind me, because I don't want to take anyone else's time, And I'm asking this teacher really valuable questions, so much so that this teacher's like, I don't know why I hadn't thought about that yet, because I'm there to collaborate with the teacher to help my kid have a better experience. And a vice principal comes walking up, inserts themselves right into the conversation, and is like, this needs to end. You can come back later. You got people behind you. And I turn around and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I didn't see you there. Like I had looked, and teacher, vice principal was like, wrap this up. And I thought, those are two moments for me where, when you talk about having money in the bank, there had already been a -10 in the bank. And again, I don't find
it's bad to start in a deficit.
Yeah. And so I just think that, like, I know that some parents are going to hear this and go, yes, I believe you, that I think there are so many principals out there who are in it because they love kids, and, but sometimes it feels like there's principals out there who are principals because they didn't work well in the classroom. And so now they're, like, those are some of the realities that I feel like some of, like me as a parent, are dealing with. And so I know that, like, I've even had conversations with Superintendent Debbie Critchfield as she's asked me about some, like, hey, we're focusing on teachers here. And I kind of took an opportunity to say, hey, if you're going to, like, focus on administrators, these would be amazing books, I think, to, help them with. And she's like, yep, actually, those are conversations we're having on the state level too.
Yeah. And I think that's where I would say, my tactic of just going out and trying to build those relationships. A lady asked me at the conference the other day, she goes, kind of the same thing, my principal's kind of standoffish. What should I do? And I said, find something social to do with them that has nothing to do with school. And no matter what, don't talk about school. Get to know them on a personal level. One of my last slides the other day was, friendships are okay. Being friends with we became friends.
Yeah.
And when we first met, I treated you like I treat every parent in my building. And then over time, that professional relationship became a friendship. We went to church together.
Yep.
I absolutely adore your children. Your husband's a great guy. I knew your family. And I think sometimes the superintendent job, I literally said to the school board, I want this job to mentor leaders in our district. I want to mentor principals. I don't want to look over their shoulder. I don't want to lead in front of them. I don't want to lead behind them. I want to stand right next to them in the buildings and mentor them. And you know what? They mentor me too, because a lot of them are smarter than I am. And I just really think that if I were struggling with a principal or with a teacher, find common ground that makes sense. And it's okay to talk about things that don't have anything to do with school. You know, hey, I see you had a Seahawks shirt on. Man, I'm a Seahawk fan too. Or, you know, come up with something, because those relationships, when you start out, like you were saying, with the vice principal in a negative, you have that deficit, that's hard to dig out of sometimes. And it's really fun because, you know, when I got to Sacagawea, I had Clark Bradley as my assistant principal, and he stayed for 2 years, and he could have retired years before, but he gave me 2 years of two of the greatest years I've ever had with a guy. And we'll be lifelong friends. And then I got a chance to have Corey Williams, and now he's going to replace me. And like-minded people, goofy, you know, friendly, going out of their way to build those relationships. We actually have a code in parent-teacher conferences. If you rub your nose, that means wrap it up. You got a line of 5 people behind you.
Yeah.
And so I'll walk by, you know, teachers and give them the. Yeah. I just stare at them. They're like, you idiot, just leave me alone. But, you know, those things do happen. But I would say that's when this is really weird, but if people are mad at me, or I sense that I always say to my wife, yeah, that person doesn't like me. And she'll go, you're an idiot. How do you know? And I'm like, oh, I just know. Well, go up and, you know, whatever. I go out of my way to even be more friendly, more engaging, come up with things to talk about that have nothing to do with what we're doing. I had a guy one time pull into he had a brand new Dodge pickup, and I'm thinking, man, maybe I need a new pickup. And I knew he was kind of one of those dads that just didn't really care for us, or didn't really, I think he'd had a bad school experience, so every school experience was bad. All I did was start talking to him about his pickup. Hey, what's the towing capacity? I've got a trailer. And he, you know, all of a sudden we're talking. The next time he pulls up, hey, Tim, he said hi to me. This is great. So I would just encourage any parent to find common ground other than school, and have those. I said that at the conference the other day. Find ways to make, and you don't have to be, I'm not saying go out and be your principal's best friend, but go out and find things that are common that you can talk about that have nothing to do with school, and let them see you as a human, let them see you as a person. Because sometimes, you know, like I know when, it was easy for me because my wife taught in the Genesee School District for 35 years, and my children grew up from preschool to 12th grade with their mom in the building. And if there was ever a problem, you know, she either dealt with it or, you know, then thank God there were really hardly no problems. But I just think that we do get those bad situations, and it's so hard to shake them off. And so you have to find a way, and just engaging in a conversation about nothing. You know, because you know, there are times when you'll see a parent coming and going, oh, I wonder if I did something wrong. You know, are they upset? And so I'll start the conversation just, hey, how was your weekend? You know, I heard you guys are traveling to a baseball tournament or whatever. I just try to find things to talk about that have nothing to do with what we're doing.
I love that. I love that, you know, one of the things that I learned from you when I was, you know, we were at Whitman for 5 years, was that there is value in like building the relationships, right? Like creating this team together, and then like not being afraid to collaborate, right? Like throwing ideas out on the table to kind of figure out like what could be this potential moving forward. I mean, I know that you and I did that a lot, when it would be like, hey, I want to try this thing, or I want to do this thing. And so often you were just like, you are not a micromanager, and you are like, I have always kind of experienced you to be very supportive of ideas. So when I came to you with ideas as the PTA president, you were like, yeah, sure, let's go, you know, let's go for this. What can I do to help you? Was often the question you asked me as the parent leader. And it was interesting because after we moved down here to West Ada, and my youngest is like in this elementary school, and it was hard because it was that first year of COVID. And it was, you know, like one of the things that was tough for her was that she had been accustomed to teachers who were very kind of that inclusive, like kind of team loving environment where like she'd leave the classroom, high fives, fist bumps, or do you want a hug, or, and I always kind of felt like my kid was known.
Yes.
Like, and I'm not the only person, I'm not the only parent. Like I would watch all these parents as they were picking up kids, smiles on those parents' faces, because they thought, oh, they are treating my child like they're so special. Every kid got to feel that, all the parents got to observe that if they wanted to. So rolling into the 4th grade year for my youngest, and I'm noticing that she's got, there's like holes in what she knows because of COVID. And it was super hard. And I remember going to the principal and saying, this was the first thing that happened. I was like, hey, I want you to know that I think this teacher's great. This is not a discount on this teacher. It's that I'm the parent and I'm noticing that I think that this and this other environment might be better for my child in a learning thing. And this principal and I had this conversation, and the principal was like, you know what? I agree with you. I'm going to have a conversation with that teacher to see if we can switch her to a different classroom. Great. Thank you so much. Right. It was that collaborative thing working with the parent. Right. And then after a period of time, we went to like a tutoring center, and the tutoring center was like, yep, there's definite spaces in here. And I remember thinking, okay, I know that we're in this situation where so many kids are, there's holes or deficits. And I also know that this teacher is doing what she can in this classroom for all of these children. And it's still not enough for my child. And that's, again, not a deficit on the teacher, not a deficit on the principal. This is my reality. And as a mom, I was like, well, I'm home right now. There's something I can do about this. So again, I went to the principal and I was like, this is the position I find myself in.
Right.
This teacher's doing everything she can, and I'm grateful for it as a mom. And also I'm thinking that my child needs an additional help, and I don't want that help to come after school because she's going to be tired. She's done learning. So
especially at that age.
Right. So what if we did my daughter's here 3 days a week, and we pull her for 2 days and do more like a homeschooling, I can, tutoring kind of stuff to kind of fill in those gaps that just aren't going to get filled in at school. And the principal was like, you know what? I totally support you. Idaho's great. All you have to do is write me an email. We can pull her those 2 days. And I was like, do you think we can get the teacher on the same page? She was like, yeah, totally. Why don't you, I'll contact the teacher my way. You contact the teacher your way. And what could have been a very tough thing for my youngest turned out to be where all the adults showed up and said, we're in it for her. We're going to collaborate together.
This is going to work.
This is going to work. And I think that collaboration is such a key part of the relationship building, right? Because we're in it for kids.
Yeah. And what we do now, so the Lewiston School District is a professional learning community where, we call it PLCs, and we have one school that is a model PLC school. We're trying to go district wide with, just doing all the right things. And the collaboration, a lot of times I think where we do make mistakes is we only collaborate in the building. But like I said earlier, we have to collaborate with the lady that lives across the street. We have to collaborate with our community partners for everything that we do. And we try, I'm so bummed, we get that survey back, like 87%, that's a B. I didn't want a B. And it was like, our parents said only 87% of them agree and strongly agree that we're communicating effectively. I want it to be 97%. I don't want to be 87%. But we have to remember that collaboration occurs outside of the building. And it's, again, we have a lot of grandparents that pick up their kids. They're my favorite. The grandparents are great because they're my age.
Yeah.
But I love it when the grandparents come in, and I just, you welcome them in and they love it. In fact, we were going to dinner downtown Boise night before last, and hey, Tim, and I look over, it's one of my grandmas. And she's with her friends. Of course, my kid rolls his eyes. He knows everybody. We're in downtown Boise, Idaho, and he knows everybody. But I think that collaboration, that's what's so key. And that's why I love what I do, because and like I said, my son and daughter are adults. They don't want to go out with their dad in Lewiston because hi, Tim. Hi, I walk off and I go chat with everybody. I know everybody. But that's the beauty of it. And when you were able to pull that together, it's the route you took, and including that teacher and that teacher says, yes, we can do this for your daughter. That's super powerful. And I think COVID, I try not to ever say that word.
I know it's like the word that will not be
said
named.
You said that at the conference. It's like, yeah, I hate that word.
Yeah.
It's set us back so far, and we're now kind of digging out of it, especially in Lewiston. We're really starting to see those scores go up and just kids get to learning back. But and even before that, I've always said this, education's weird. We have this building, and in each building there's a bunch of rooms, and each room has a door. And in the olden days, we would say, here's your keys, go open that door. All the stuff you need is in that room. Go teach English, and shut the door. And we would almost leave, we would leave teachers to their own, they're professionals. They have college degrees and teaching certificates. Go teach. And now we're not doing that anymore. We're literally asking them to work with their partners, work with their grade level. All the 7th grade math teachers are going to work together, and they're going to collaborate on building common formative assessments. And they're going to look at that data and say, hey, Alexis, what did you do? Your test scores or your assessment scores are way higher than mine. How did you teach it? Teach me how to teach it. I want my kids to have that score. And then the next unit, hey, Tim, your test scores are better than mine. How did you do that? And it's maybe that's my expertise and your expertise. And so we're asking them to collaborate, and they're doing a great job of it. But there's so much more to collaboration than just in the building. And it's that, I have this art teacher. Her name is Rachel Eastman. She's crazy. I absolutely love this woman. And when I got to Sacagawea, she kept asking, hey, I want to paint lockers and I want to paint murals on the walls. And she just kind of got ignored. So she came into me and she said, I want to paint book spines on locker doors. And I said, okay. She goes, okay, what? I said, you can, but, and she goes, oh, there's a but. I said, yeah, my favorite book is by Norman MacLean. It's called A River Runs Through It. I need that painted on a locker. And she goes, okay. So now we have like 100 lockers with these book spines, the lightning thief and, hatchet and all, and, it looks just like the spine.
Oh my gosh. I want a photo.
I'll send you one. It's so cool.
Do.
So then it was, hey, can we paint murals on the back of the gym wall? Uh-huh. What do you need? I need a lift. So we get a man lift, and they, so she's done all these things. And what's crazy about it is she'll have up to sometimes 100 kids in art club. Well, once you say yes to Rachel, so then it's like, oh, I want to have a creative carnival. What the heck is a creative carnival? She goes, I want the gym. Okay, what are we going to do? Oh, we're going to have face painting, and we're going to have art stations, and we're going to have goodies, and we're going to have an art show, and there's going to be, well, we're about to have our second creative carnival. And here's what she does. She brings in hundreds of people that maybe would not ever come into our building, because who comes into your building? The sports parents, right? My parents, Steve and Mary Sperber, come into your building because they're going to watch their son play sports. All of a sudden, she's bringing in parents, grandparents, the neighbor lady. All of these people are coming into our building because I got this crazy art teacher that's driving me crazy, putting on all these wonderful events. She has the maintenance guy building her art. They're building her art walls where she can hang the art from. This thing has gone nuts. And people are like, man, this is, we've never done this before. No, we've never let her do this before. And the byproduct is collaboration. The byproduct is she's bringing people to us. I'm sorry, I'm probably talking too much, but
no, I love it.
So Sacagawea Middle School, we used to have I think she was called Miss Sacagawea, and there was a Native American dress made of deer skin. I mean, it's beautiful. It's leather, and they had a mascot, and a person would win the contest, and she got to be Miss Sacagawea, and she'd wear this dress. And this grandma comes to the art show. She's just a sweetheart, and she goes, "I was Miss Sacagawea in like 1960 something or whatever, 70 something. I don't remember." And she goes, "And I made my own dress, and it didn't look very good, but I made it because the other one didn't fit." And I said, "Do you want it back?" And she goes, "What?" And I said, "We found it." Whoa. She goes, "No, you didn't." And I'm like, "Swear to God, come on." And I grab her by the hand, and we go down to storage, and I pull out this wardrobe bag, and I pull out this dress. And I said, "We didn't know whose it was." She goes, "I made that when I was like 13 years old, or my grandma made it or whatever." And we gave her the dress that she and her grandma made, or whoever, I can't remember, but we gave it back to her. And that all happened because Rachel Eastman put on an art show and brought in dozens of people. And literally, our art students aren't necessarily the kids that are playing football or playing basketball. They're kids that aren't the popular kids. But at the art show, they're the popular kids. And the byproduct, again, is the people who come in. The simple act of telling that lady, "Hey, we found this dress. You want it back?" And we gave it to her. And because it was in a bag, it was in a wardrobe. We didn't have a place to display it. And we now have a collaborative colleague that lady will say good things about Sacagawea Middle School forever and ever and ever, all because the art teacher continually, these shows get bigger and bigger, and now Creative Carnival, she created collaboration. Now she's painting a huge volleyball mural outside of the girls' locker room wall, on our gym building. It's the stuff she does is incredible, but the byproduct, she's bringing people into our building that would never come in, and she's making kids literally glow that have never had the opportunity to show off before. They're not basketball players. They're not volleyball players. They're artists. And she makes them feel like they're the greatest artists of all time. And I'll be honest, some of them are incredible. Some of the work that's getting done is absolutely amazing. And the byproduct is we get to meet more people, and they come in our building, and it's amazing.
I love hearing these stories because it's like it's easy to bring in some of these, parents, the natural, societal ways in which we engage as a community. But it's like, there's other ways to do that. And when we find those other ways that actually are super fantastic, we meet a different group of people, and we get to help another set of students shine in what they're doing. So I could talk to you all day long.
Sorry, I could go on and on.
No, I love it. So I wanted to, just before we wrap up the conversation, you have a couple of books that I think are great, that I think are good recommendations for people to get a hold of if they haven't read them yet.
Yeah. So I talked about Baruti Kafele before. He has a book called The Principal 50. It's super thin. It's just 50 things principals need to do to be effective. He has the Assistant Principal 50. There's all kinds of them. Some of them are pretty similar, but some of them, just certain things that I look back on. I always look back into that book and think, okay, what do I need to be doing? Like leading my building from outside in the front. Michael Fullen has a book. He's a Canadian educator. And it every time I change jobs, I read the book, and it's basically a leadership in motion. Anytime there's change, it's called motion leadership, but anytime there's change, you start change, and, you get off on the right foot, and it's growing and growing and growing and growing. And then all of a sudden there's this huge implementation dip, and it's like, okay, how do you avoid the dip? And so right now, it's in my backpack out in the car. I'm rereading it again, because it's all about culture. Anthony Muhammad wrote a book about school culture, and I read it every time I change.
What's the name of that book?
Changing School Culture, I believe. I'd have to dig it. I've read it so many times I don't think I pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But it talks about how do you build culture in schools. He's the culture guy for Solution Tree, and Anthony Muhammad is a great author. I've met him a couple of times, and but culture is the key.
Mm-hmm.
We're the culture keepers, not the principals. I have to do principal paperwork and stuff that gets me away, but the whole idea is building culture. And now that I'm, transitioning into a whole different position with 11 schools and 4,500 students instead of one school and 540 students, I'm reading that motion leadership book again right now because it you have to build the culture, and to avoid the implementation dips when you make changes. It's culture. It's based on keeping the positive culture, based on making sure you're communicating effectively, and making sure, one of the things that Lance, our superintendent right now, has done very well is he has taught us how important it is to celebrate. And we celebrate everything. We have Facebook's, all of the Instagram, all of that social media. And even though sometimes it can kill us, when we are constantly putting out the cool stuff our kids are doing, I'm the Indian Ed person for our district, and my parent committee put on the first Indian Ed parent committee powwow last weekend. It was incredible. I mean, it's going to become a tradition, and it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. As soon as it was over, Shelby, our social media person, put it all over Facebook. And all over, the other, I don't know how to use the other two, Instagram and Snapchat. I get videos of my granddaughter on Snapchat. That's the only thing I know how to do, play.
Yeah.
But we celebrate everything. We celebrate test scores, but we also celebrate game scores, and we celebrate art shows and concerts and drama productions. And my colleague, Mary, I think it was the reading scores. Our kids made their reading goals, and she had to hold a snake. I'm like, no, I'll cut my hair off. I got a tattoo because I lost a bet once.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not holding a snake, but there are things, that we do, we just celebrate it, and we send it out there for people to see, because there's so much negative thing. There's so many negative things in education right now, that we're yelling at the top of our lungs so you can hear the positives and you can hear our celebrations. And the one thing that I want to make sure I do as I take over this new role is remember to celebrate every day. And I told the PTA folks the other day, celebrate your schools. I was in my school and I saw this teacher doing this, and oh my God, it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. Or we had field day, and this one little boy, this other kid helped him. Just those anything you can do to celebrate is worth celebrating, and it paints a light of our district that, man, really good things are happening. And Lance has done a great job, and I want to continue that.
So I have a couple of friends in Lewiston still, and I saw one of them over the weekend, and she said to me that she loves the school district social media, that she has noticed all of these things that are out. And I remember Lance telling me that he's like, sometimes people, or just even districts, whatever, he's like, people are like putting out the obvious, like the score of, like this championship here, or, we're celebrating this teacher right here, or we're doing this thing over here. But he's like, I want people to see the everyday. Mm-hmm. I want people to see kids working on this project in this classroom in this elementary school. And I follow Lewiston, and I love it. Yeah. And I'm hoping that other districts start to notice this, that this is, I don't follow every district in the state. Not every district in the state has a social media page, right? But I do love that Lewiston is putting those good things out of the everyday great things that are happening in our school, because there are great things happening in our schools, in our public schools, every single day.
Yeah, and some of the innovation that teachers are using, and the cool things they do for kids. We had a little boy the other day. I don't know if you saw it. It literally saved his friend's life at the skate park.
I did. I reshared that on my social media page, because I was like, oh my gosh, I posted on social media, I was like, this is what is so cool to me is that here's a kid that did this thing and the firefighters wanted to recognize this 13-year-old, and then they do that, and then the school shares it to recognize the kid and the firefighters, and it's this whole big thing. And I like put that on my stories, and I was like, this is what a school community looks like who is in it together.
Yeah. And, Braxton, man, talk about a kid that it's so cool what he did. He literally used direct pressure to save this kid's life. He was bleeding. He had the wherewithal to tell Siri to call 911 on his phone. He couldn't do it himself because his hands were bloody. And he gets the paramedics there. He gets more adults to help. He gets the kids' parents coming. The kid gets life flighted to Spokane. It was so cool. And we celebrate that kid. And he walks around the school with this grin on his face now. And it's all because of adults sharing this story. And, of course, our fire department is amazing in Lewiston. Chris Jacks is one of our captains. And he called, hey, we're coming to your school today. It just happened yesterday. Doesn't care. We're bringing this kid an award. And now I think there's more agencies getting involved in this. But it's all about celebrating heroism and friendship, and this kid's reaction to a horrible, most adults would have ran. They would have ran away. And this kid instead, man, what he did, and he didn't know, he'd never been taught to do those things, but we celebrated it. And we'll continue to celebrate those things. That's the one thing I absolutely want to, my hope is to not take any steps backwards we're in the Lewiston School District right now. There's so many administrative openings. Our high school principal retired and his assistant left for Coeur d'Alene, and he took his wife with him, who's also a principal. And then I moved a principal to the high school. David Croneman's going to be our high school principal. So his position is now open. And then I moved Jennifer Gomez to the district office, and now her position is going to be open. And so we have this huge change. We're hiring an assistant superintendent for the first time in 5 years because we haven't had one. I don't want to take steps backwards. I want to continue the things that we're doing really, really well. And that collaboration, the building of, just the friendships and the community, family, it's so important right now, and building up those young leaders. I'm going to have an opportunity to really put my money where my mouth is and mentor the principals like I told the school board I would if they hired me. And so it's like, okay, Tim, put up or shut up, you better mentor help these people out and help them be successful, and hopefully teach them the things that create collaboration. And, and I go back again, Rachel, the art teacher, she's so fun to have around. And I think she had a negative experience as a teacher. But then all of a sudden we just believed in what she was doing. And the proof is in the number of kids that follow her, the number of kids that are in the art club, the number of kids that are putting these carnivals on and helping paint these murals. And it's all about community and collaboration. And then it becomes a family, and then it's the greatest job in the whole wide world. And here we are.
I love hearing you say it's the greatest job in the whole wide world. Really I've heard you say that a lot in the 10 years that I've known you. So at the end of every conversation, I always do a takeaway. Like, what am I going to take away from this conversation? I ask my guests to do one, and I do one. Would you like me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. So the thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is that I think one of the things I heard you say without saying it was that it's important for principals to find ways to say yes.
Yes.
To find ways to get the thing done, if it's a good idea, You
taught me that, by the way.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'll tell you. Maybe that's going to be my takeaway.
but finding ways to say yes, because such great things can come from it, and really what that is the collaboration, the teamwork, the relationship building, the trust, that develops, and treating people like human beings. All of the things that have been discussed in this conversation come when we find ways to say yes.
Yeah. honestly, when you became part of our PTA, I was gun shy. I mean, I was like, oh boy.
Just because
Just
my personality?
no. Prior to you,
Oh, okay.
there were things that, it was like, oh, this is an elephant, this thing's huge. And I just was nervous, and I just, it's like, oh, I don't want to do more things. I just can't do more things. I don't want, what if it goes wrong? And you didn't let any of that happen. And then the more I said yes, the cooler things got, and, and then our PTA just exploded. I said that at the conference the other day. You were one of the ones that taught me to say yes. Rachel, my art teacher, taught me to say yes. And the byproduct of it is just great things. But I really believe that giving opportunity, even though you're not completely sure of the outcome, and sometimes I say no.
Yeah.
Not very often, but sometimes I do. But what comes of it is so great. And just the, like I said, the families coming in to our building because they're here to have face painting and eat popcorn and see artwork from our kids. That's just created a whole different clientele of folks that we now get to know. So I have you to thank for that. My takeaway, I think, from this is one of the coolest things I think I've ever got to experience. I don't know if I told you this while we were on air, but my son said last night, he goes, "Hey, Dad, my son's a podcaster. He loves podcasts, right?" And he goes, "People get into trouble on podcasts, so be careful what you say." And I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, just don't say stupid stuff." And I'm like, "Okay, well, my kid tells me now to say stupid stuff a lot."
Yeah.
But this was great. And I love that you're advocating for Idaho kids. And my takeaway is more people need to advocate for Idaho kids. I can't wait to advocate in the new role that I'm in. I think I do a pretty good job of it in my little isolated 540 some student building. But now I kind of get to shout it from the top of my lungs across 11 schools. And I don't plan on being in Boise a lot, but I know I will be. And I think right now is the time to advocate for kids, and you advocate for kids through the PTA. The conference, by the way, I loved being there. I loved the people. I met this little lady named Charlie. She was sitting at my table, and you could just tell that this lady is out there working for kids. And she's a grandma. She doesn't have kids in the school, but she's involved in PTA, and PTA has a soft spot in my heart anyway. And getting to come to the conference I was trying to remember back the first time I spoke 7 years ago or whatever. It seemed like you doubled the number of people there. I mean, it had to be doubled or tripled. There was a lot of folks in that room, and they were, kind of packed in, and it was really cool. But advocating for kids and what you're doing with this podcast, and I hope people, take something away from every single one of them. But we need more advocates for kids, teachers, principals, public education as a whole, special ed, our classified staff members. In my building, I hang out with the cooks. If I just need to have a moment where I go into the kitchen and Kelly and Jean and the girls are in there, and, they're usually giving me heck about something in a joking manner, but I can go to the cafeteria and just hang out and relax. But we need to advocate for public education, and that's what this podcast does. And I really appreciate being on it because you're a good advocate, and people can learn from you. And I think more people should be doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I do want to say one thing because I had this thought, and I think that I think so many people in public education, especially the young ones or the people who are even partway through, feel so much of a draw. Like there's so many things. There's like that. You and I spoke years ago about this book called margin. It's called Margin, like positive margin, negative margin, right? And like if there's too many things that are taking away from the negative, then we don't have enough of a positive margin, right? And we want a positive margin. It's a great book. I recommend reading it. And as I think, principals feel this way, teachers, parents for sure, and even students. And there's a moment an experience that you and I had, we weren't actually, so when I became the PTA president, along the way, or right at the very beginning, I remember saying, I want to do this differently, because right now I feel like this parent group, and it's not just PTAs that feel this way. A lot of them do, PTOs, boosters. They just feel like a cash box, that I'm here to do the fundraisers, to make up for the deficits in the schools and the things I want to make sure my kids are having.
Right.
And so I came to you and I said, I want to do this differently. And I've already talked to my parents about it. Some of them are a little iffy. I know there's definitely one teacher that's not very happy with me. I want to make sure we get the things that the teachers need, but I don't want to feel like we have to rely on these fundraisers all the time. I don't even like doing them. This isn't why I show up every day to ask people for money, And so you were like, yeah, I support you. I'm in on this. That sounds great. And one of the ways that this played out was that there were a couple, and I remember you saying to me at some point, I don't know that the teachers are always coming to me and asking me for things that, I could try to provide with the budget that I have at my school, right? That was part of this conversation at some point. So I'm in the teacher's lounge one day, or walking in the hallway. No, I'm walking in the hallway, and these teachers see me and they're like, hey, Alexis, we really want this really great program, and we're wondering if the PTA will cover the cost. And I was like, that sounds so cool. That was my response. That sounds like a really great thing. Have you asked Tim yet? And they both kind of like got these looks on their faces of a little bit of a surprise, and they were like, no, we haven't. And I was like, would you mind asking him first?
Yep.
And then come follow up with me. And they were like, okay. So I might have seen them at some point when I was in the teacher's lounge, watch them walk into your room. They come walking out, and they almost they kind of start to pass me. And I looked at them and I was like, so did you get to talk to Tim? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, what? And they said, oh, he's going to cover it. Like, don't even worry about it. And I was like, yes. I remember thinking, yes. And the point of this is that it was a team effort to help us all have a positive margin, instead of feeling like everyone was being taken from. And I think that is like one of the most important things that I think we need to do in our communities right now, more than ever, is come together to help support a positive margin, so that, and when we do that, we get more yeses, we get more collaboration, we get more relationship building, and we get beyond the walls of the school, and we reach the grandparents and the business owners and the, fire chiefs and, fire department, all the people. We reach them. And then all of a sudden we have this incredible community that we all love being a part of.
Well, I agree. And, the one thing, just to make sure I don't forget to say this, when you were in the PTA, you and I said this at the conference again, you brought in, we had events that were meaningful, that were easy, and it brought in parents that I don't always get to see. Some of those economically disadvantaged families that I don't get to see on a regular basis, because they just don't come to things. And, you guys were always so good at offering a meal and making sure, and all of a sudden some of those it'd be wall-to-wall people. And that was the difference for me. That was the positive margin for me, because the byproduct was, we have families in our building that would never come, but because these events are easy, they're not flamboyant or crazy or, whatever. They were just simple events like STEM night.
Yeah. And everything was free. Like
everything was free.
Never charged anyone anything.
You can have a sandwich, you can have popcorn, you can have ice cream, you can have whatever. And people came for that. And again, that's how I build those relationships. That was an opportunity for me to see folks in a totally non-threatening, not sitting across from me in my desk saying, your son or daughter did this. It was just, hey, what are you guys building? Hey, what are you guys drawing? What are you doing? And those are positive margins for me.
I love that. I love being at Whitman Elementary with my kids. That was a magical time. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
being my children's principal and for being my friend. And thank you for coming to the podcast. This has been something I've been really looking forward to.
Well, I have to, and thank you, because this is really super cool.